My name is Larry Cushy, or Lawrence Cushy more formally, and I have a doctoral degree in epidemiology. My degree is in nutrition, but my profession and all the work that I do is epidemiologic research. So what is epidemiology? Epidemiology is really the study of the distributions and the factors that result in disease in human populations, and also looking at outcomes for people who have developed disease. And so what I am more specifically is, with a degree in nutrition and doing all my work in epidemiology, I'm what's considered a nutritional epidemiologist, which means that I look at dietary factors and associated activities like physical activity, body size, etc., and how that might be related to development of chronic diseases. And more specifically, most of the work that I've done and I continue to do is in cancer, and more specifically in that context, in breast cancer. But I've been involved in studies in a lot of other areas as well.
Yes.
So soy in recent years has really been characterized as a food that's really high in what are known as phytoestrogens. Okay?
Yes. And when we hear estrogen, we go crazy.
Right. So when you hear the word estrogens, then maybe you're thinking, oh, those are female sex hormones. Yeah. And so maybe if you're eating a food that's high in plant estrogens, phytoestrogens, maybe that means that people are going to start developing man boobs or something like that, and, going to become, sort of change their sexual orientation or whatever. But that's not what phytoestrogens are about at all.
Okay.
And basically, the term, unfortunately, has resulted in a lot of misconceptions of, the sort of the health effects of soy foods. Basically, what that term refers to is that there are these chemical compounds that are found in soy. Soy is a particularly rich source of these that interact with estrogen receptors, which are on cells. Okay, so some cells, have a lot of estrogen receptors, and some don't. And they can potentially bind to those receptors on the cells. And by doing so, they can initiate potentially this cascade of reactions that include, among other effects, sort of cell proliferation. That's what the main purpose of estrogens in women are about. Okay? So estrogen levels go up, the lining of the uterus, sort of gets thicker, and then estrogen levels go down over the course of a menstrual cycle, and the lining of the uterus gets sloughed off, and you have the period and that type of thing, and so there's this natural sort of cycling of estrogen levels, and then as I mentioned, if you become pregnant at the one point, then the estrogen levels continue to rise, and it shoots up much higher to support the growth of the fetus, and so when people think of that as the reason for estrogens, and then they hear the term phytoestrogens, then they think, oh, these same compounds are going to cause cell proliferation in my breast cancer or something like that. And so it's really bad if I have breast cancer, that have particularly breast cancer cells that have a lot of estrogen receptors on them.
Yeah.
So ER positive breast cancers, as it's sort of abbreviated in the United States, as opposed to ER negative breast cancers. But it turns out that so when you put the cells like breast cancer cells in a lab, in a petri dish, and you expose them to these phytoestrogens, yes, they proliferate. But if you look at it in humans, and even in rats or something like that have had human breast cancer cells stuck on them, which is sounds really weird, but they do studies like that.
Oh my God!
Then,
things we do.
Right. Then things don't necessarily quite turn out the same way.
As in the lab.
Right, because you're producing, the mouse, humans, are producing estrogens internally already, and those are much more powerful than the phytoestrogens in terms of their estrogenic activity. So if that's the only thing a cell is exposed to, then yeah, maybe it will promote cell proliferation. But if they're exposed to those phytoestrogens in the context of other estrogen sources and that type of thing. So obviously ovaries are one source in women, of estrogens, but also adipose tissue, fat tissue is. So even if you're postmenopausal and your ovaries are no longer, sort of functioning, as they had before, you might still be producing estrogens from your body endogenously, And so they're much more powerful in terms of those estrogenic cell proliferation effects than the phytoestrogens. And so if the phytoestrogens, by potentially binding to these estrogen receptors, might actually be beneficial for cancer risk because they're preventing the binding at
Of
least
the- of
partially
the real estrogen.
Right, exactly. So or they compete, so the real estrogens, their effect is dampened somewhat. So that's part of what may be going on, because when we've actually done research studies, there are now 4 of these prospective cohort studies in women with breast cancer, that in every single one of them, 2 conducted in the U.S., I think 1 was in the U.S. that I was involved in, 1 in Canada, I think, if I recall correctly, and 2 in China. Every one of those studies show that women who eat more soy foods compared with those who eat less have better overall survival, and a couple of them suggest maybe lower recurrence rates. So it actually looks like eating soy for someone who has breast cancer is actually probably good, to at least eat on some regular basis. And the same thing we see, with prostate cancer risk.
Oh,
and, that
even
type
for
of
prostate cancer?
so
soy has protective properties for them?
Yeah, for the development of prostate cancer. There haven't been the same types of studies for men with prostate cancer and whether soy makes a difference, afterwards. But for the development of prostate cancer, there have been a number of studies that suggest, if anything, it's probably lowers the likelihood of developing prostate cancer. Studies have shown that soy foods lower the likelihood of developing heart disease,
Wow.
getting fractures, bone fractures,
Right.
So it's eating these traditional soy foods, as part of sort of traditional healthy Thai cuisine is probably a reasonable thing,
So it's not to shy. We shouldn't shy away from
Yeah, shouldn't
from soy
shy
at
away
all.
for it, whatever. Yeah.
And you